Welcome to everybody. And thank you once again for your presence. And we thank Father Mokone for leading us these days and for your generosity. Over to you, Father.
So thank you very much for your presence as well and the prayer we just had. I come back to these 3 circles because they help us to digest and to focus on what we are doing here in this process of human growth and accompaniment. Yesterday we focused on them, but we were looking more on the first commandment, how it helps us to understand the reality of loving oneself, loving one's neighbor, and also loving God himself. So today we will look not so much on the needs, but we will look at the level of the values. And why I'm showing you these 3 circles, we talk about the whole issue of the hierarchy of values, but we can also use another language like the model of the church as the people of God. Now, you know, the same reality is represented in circles around, but not as a hierarchy where there is a ladder approach. So I just offer that as well, so that at least, you know, we understand what we are talking about. That I'm myself on the ground, there are people around me, and then there's God everywhere. That's what I'm experiencing. So I draw this attention here because this is what we looked yesterday. And we also used the language of the founder. He said, first, let me first be human and let us try to be saints. No, let us first try to be Christian and let us try to be saints. So you can play with the same reality using the same language, but in different contexts. So today you will see me using the hierarchy of values, but you can also look at it from this understanding so that it does not mislead in your understanding that there are some values that are higher than the others in terms of understanding them. So I use the word hierarchy of values, you know. The importance of the hierarchy of values or the way of organizing the values is to become the basis on which one or may objectify the motivation of anybody as far as the values are concerned. In other words, we have looked yesterday in the area I called it the second dimension, where there is the real good and the apparent good. And we realize that there is a kind of commonality in that area where you find that the values that are leading us or the experience that leads us from what is real good and to apparent good, they have something in common. There is always good in them, but the results are not always the same. And we have looked at that, how the apparent good presents itself, but also how the real good, with time, how it purifies the motivation of somebody. So this is very important when we are working on this issue of the motivation, that we're not only looking at the needs, but we are also looking at the values that sometimes may be at the service of the needs. And so it is important to be aware of those realities, the needs as we have looked yesterday, but also the values. Now, the first level here that we're talking about here, you will see, maybe let me first go back here. We have 4 values, but I just want to focus our attention so that we don't get lost in the explanations. Here, in what is good for me, you will find that we have what we call the natural values, which we will explain later on what they are all about. And then the second level, where there is a relationship between other people, that's where we get the moral values. And then on the third level there, where there is God in it, we get those religious values that brings us into union with God. So we will see how those things work. But it is good to have a clear frame of mind so that when we work with people, we can help them to understand themselves better, or even to organize themselves in a life-giving way. Not looking down at what they have, how they have organized, but just giving them an alternative so that they can see the difference between what they have and what they need to do in their life. So we start with the values which are not specifically human. These are the values which do not distinguish the human beings from animals. So in other words, we all have the gift of life. These are the values of sensitivity and biological life. They have to do with pain and pleasure, health and illness. So these are the values that us as human beings and also as animals do have. But then we start seeing the difference when we talk about the natural values, as I've indicated there. They are human because they differentiate the human person from animals. In other words, you start hearing something like prosperity or misery, personal success or failure. So you see the difference already there. They remain below or inframoral because they do not affect what is most typically human. They do not involve an exercise of liberty and responsibility of the self. We spoke a lot this morning in terms of how we internalize ways of accompaniment. We were dealing with the issue of the dynamics in the group. You know, how do we help the people to be aware of what is in their lives that is known to others but not to them, but also how to help them to see what is known to them but not known to others, and then also helping to realize them, to make them realize what is a mystery to everybody, and also a mystery in terms of it's God only who knows the reality of us all. So in that dynamic there, we begin to see that there is a difference in the exercise of liberty in that sense. So they are natural values because they are concerned with the spiritual nature as well as the sensory nature of the person. So here, spiritual values are understood in the sense that they are not concerned with the biological nature of the person, that is, the truth as part of the objective value and knowledge as part of the subjective value. In other words, when I'm faced with the truth, it is an objective truth or reality value, but the knowledge I've acquired, that helps me to see that there is something that I need to acquire in my own self, like my own culture. It will not be presented as the absolute truth, but it will be presented to me as the knowledge that has been acquired. So that's why we learn and open other new avenues in terms of our own culture. We learn from each other, and in that sense. So beauty as a virtue there, or a value, you can see it is an objective value. But then when we start talking about good or bad, is from the part of the subjective value. So now this is how far it goes with the natural values. And you can see here in the natural values, the central point is what is good for me. And that in itself doesn't actually help me to transcend myself, because that's where you find elements of individualism, where people are locked in themselves and then are not able to go beyond, because the whole world is seen as only when it is good for me. When it does not serve me, it's not good. And we have seen in many ways how different good models have been used in this particular way. Now, the moral values, these values have a greater unity than the natural values. So there is a relationship between the different values, as well as if we go to the needs are also related to each other and they provoke each other, especially those unconscious ones. You might be fighting with somebody, but not realizing that the main need that was provoked or frustrated was the need for affect, and then there was no support. So you come back home and you see a poor dog lying there, and then you see the father or the mother of the house kicking the dog, and you don't know why is this one kicking the dog, you see. But then you realize the first thing that was not taken care of is the lack of support where the person came from. That is so these moral values, they are practical and they concern the action of the person because it proceeds from the free will. They do not only look at the work accomplished, they weigh the worth of the person. The act of the person is just judged as good or evil or bad, and the person will be judged as good or bad. So in other words, they look at the underlying motivations, why somebody did what he did, and then what are the underlying motivations in all that. A person with finest qualities of intelligence, beauty, strength, etc., and yet negative from the moral point of view is considered a bad person. So you see how many qualities you have, the intelligence, beauty, strength, and everything. But this person, the way he has used his qualities, for example, he might be smart, he might be beautiful, strength, and so forth. Like if I just give you an example, at the moment in the reality of South Africa, people are using some of their intelligence, their strength to start looting. Can you see whether that is a very morally good act when you look on the television? It's not life-giving at all, but yet they have invested some of their qualities and so forth. So on the contrary, a poor person with average gifts of intelligence and physique, but has a good will and is morally positive, is considered a good person. So basically just to help us to explain and to present the values to those who are in accompaniment or those who are still at the beginning, but also for us to help ourselves to be clear of what we are talking about. Now, we're talking about the religious values, as I said before. These religious values here, they help us to be in communion with God. So that's where we are talking about. A religious value is first of all sacred, the divine, God, as you can see in the picture, in the circles that I've presented there. The ultimate foundation of values, Jesus Christ. So when we look at subjectively, a religious value is realized within a religion. And it is an attitude of respect, submission, and trust to the divine. It involves piety, holiness, prayer, sacraments. So all those values that we see in the person, that the person is acquiring and also living according to them, we begin to realize the person is able to live according to his pronounced values in a conscious way, and is free to live those values. So that is one way that we help the person to live according to the proclaimed values. But these are called the religious values because one makes a commitment on this kind of values in a public and also in a commitment. You know, when we first took our vows, we said, before you, Father General, or before you, the delegate of the Father General, we commit ourselves to this. So that is something that we are doing there. What is essential to a religious value is a certain quality of totality and transcendence. So you see already that there is an element of going beyond oneself. There is an element of going beyond oneself, surrendering oneself to God or even to others. What stands before us is a religious value, is no longer just a human activity, but a supreme reality. Now, what becomes clear is that a religious value cannot be reduced to a moral value, but still the two are linked. If you look at like in the community experience, there is a tendency to reduce community life to just a company of people. But you have people there who's got a vocation, who are trying to live according to their vows and are committed in whatever they do. So there could be a reduction of that reality, just say these people are just gathered here, you know. But then we also have to realize that it's not just the human aspect that is involved, but there is also a religious aspect that is combined, even though the two are more or less intertwined in that reality. So both the moral and the religious values are self-transcending and are different from the natural values. They engage the exercise of freedom of the whole person towards the self, transcendence for union with God. In other words, these are the things that help us to go beyond ourselves, but not only just to go beyond ourselves, but to be in union with God. So in this case, we begin to see if we are working with somebody, when we say, let us first be human or help the person to be human, we are actually focusing on some of his natural values. Is this person able to say good morning in the morning? Or is he just passing you like, you know, or, you know, is the person able to see that when I'm dishing some food there or he's dishing some food, there is a queue behind, you know, all those kind of things. So these are some of the things that you can see when we're talking about human values. Those are natural values that one has to be able to help people to live according to them. Up to so far, I think this the thing is clear, but I don't know if there is any observing or vertical comment or any thing that you want to say.
Okay, you are welcome to just raise up your hand as we've done before.
If that is crystal clear, then it means at least you can see when you are going to do accompaniment, at least you have everything sorted out. But it's not as easy as I have presented it, because these realities are affected by some of the unconscious needs. So this is also very important, to listen not only to the head, but to listen to what we are going through in terms of our needs and our motivation and our feelings. So from the head point of view, everything is clear. But when it comes to experience, as we have seen in this morning, there was a different reality. Now, we come now to something like reading the problem. The human existence developed at two levels and has two areas of tension. Remember when we started talking about awareness, the first thing of awareness is to become aware of the basic tension that is within all of us and to try to understand it from those different expressions. We said first, there is a tension, a basic tension between our life of faith, virtue, and our life of sin, which is a conscious tension. The second one was the tension between what is really good and what is apparently good. So that in itself, you realize, you begin to see the mixture of what is conscious and what is unconscious. So the human existence developed at two levels and has two areas of tension. On the religious level, each person is called to take a position before God, as we have seen in terms of the religious values and so forth. Hence, there is tension in the encounter. It gives life, but also death, that it carries a lot of anxiety. Anybody who has not experienced anxiety here in this room, please raise up your hand. So in other words, anxiety is something that, there is Tonino there who has raised up his hand, okay. So it is a reality that is known, that can also be felt, even though it is not anxiety that is not here. So the other level is the psychological level. There are also encounters of psychological nature where the preoccupations that are not immediately religious in nature, for example, fear, anxiety, questions, etc., struggles between the ideals like success, self-image, and so forth, and aspects of the actual self, the needs and problems of relationship and communication. In other words, we begin to see that sometimes in our way of thinking, there is a kind of tension. This tension comes out because of the needs, because of the fear. Like, for example, if we go into formation, what is the first need? Am I going to be able to handle and be able to help the ones I'm accompanying the best of my ability? Or am I going to be accepted? Or do I have enough training? All those kind of issues, they are coming into play. And then also my own way of looking at myself. Am I having an image of myself that is helpful or that is not helpful? Or do I have a particular lifestyle that helps me to deal with the success and the failure at time? Or is my self-image avoiding me to deal with the issues that I need to deal with, and therefore I tend to suppress what I'm going through? So those are things that are being coming up at that time. When one leaves these two areas as if they are separate entities, one experiences a kind of torment that does not really have sense. When a person is locked in a vicious cycle, you remember our fellow yesterday of we had the achiever, we had what is the other one? The dabbler, and then you have the... So whom can you say was more caught up in a vicious cycle between those three? Which one? The dabbler. Because the stressor, at least even though he was stressing, he was able to reach his goal. But the dabbler, always he started something, never finished it. Started something, never finished it. Started, never finished, you see. So those are the kind of things that we begin to see, that why is the person keep on living in a vicious cycle, Somebody made an example of a vicious cycle. He said, if you want to see the dog undecided, put it between meat and milk and just leave it there. it will be turning like this, until it dies, because it cannot just decide which is the best, you see. So even ourselves, sometimes we find ourselves caught up in a vicious cycle and we don't know how to come out. So we see that the person gets absorbed in himself or herself and goes in almost sterile suffering. The same happens when a person absorbed in the spiritual level, that neglecting concrete reality. So both levels, one can be absorbed. So in other words, there is a need to integrate these two realities so that one is able to freely live up to his ideals, but with his 2 feet on the ground. So that is also something that is very helpful. So in other words, within every psychological struggle, there is also a religious one, and that is really where the true problem lies. In other words, we help the person to see how the problems that he's facing helps him to embrace the cross, helps him to find meaning in God. How does he go also through some element of purification as he is struggling in his human realities? Ultimately, at the psychological level, it is God who calls the person to a new kind of relationship, which touches the heart concretely at that point, where he is divided in himself and is alienated from oneself. So even in our approach, when we give alternative information and present the values, it is really left up to the individual to see the light, because it is God who is at work. We are instruments in helping the person to see the possibilities and the opportunities, but the work takes place within the person. I'm sure there is a saying, that says, you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't lead the water to drink. So that it's very helpful in the same, but in our experience, we also try to help the person to see what are the values that he has, but also what are his needs in terms of what he needs to work on. Holding the two levels together means that there is a psycho-spiritual, experience. It is not just a struggle between ideals of God and the ideals of man. It is not only a struggle between the limits imposed to the human freedom and the exigence of responding to the reality. It is rather a psycho-spiritual reality, an appeal directed to me to do some good that I can and that I want to, if only I can let myself be helped. So the basic thing is the need to realize help in my own life. And when that happens, the process of formation is facilitated in a much more life-giving way. Sometimes we are blocked in our own experiences because of other experiences that happens in the past. So that is the point where at least we help the person to see some of these blocks. Because sometimes when you offer help to somebody who has a stumbling block in his life, you need to refer the person and say, okay, let's see, let's look at the same problem, but from a different point of view. Somebody might help you in that sense. So that is also very helpful. We try to do this in the morning to open the accompaniment, to see that accompaniment also can happen within a group, but also can happen within just for the person himself. What is the value of becoming aware of these two realities? It is particularly to prepare somebody through personal accompaniment, but you prepare the person to be able also to benefit from the group accompaniment. That is the purpose why we are trying to say, look, the two are always very complementary to each other. Because what the companions will say to the person, it might be very helpful to use their own language to point at the same reality, which you, as a one who's accompanying, may not be able to come across as clearly as they do. So that is one of the reasons. But also at the same time, the language that is being used at that level, the person might understand it much more than the language that happens also in terms of the accompaniment. So you send the person, you prepare first of all the person for accompaniment, personal accompaniment. But when you think that the person is ready, then you can send the person to a group dynamic so that the person can benefit. But then when the person comes back, you evaluate the progress and see what are the issues that are helpful, what are the things that are raised within the group dynamic that you could not raise yourself as a thing. And in that way, the person becomes even much more open, because what you were talking about was now put into practice into a group dynamic. So I hope this helps a little bit in terms of accompaniment. So our work as formators is to enable those who are formandees to see the interconnection between the two levels, helping them to see the connection between the two and create the connection for people who are in need. In other words, we try to help the person to deal with the realities that are involved. Now, the means of doing that is, do not remind the person of the ideals he already knows, for that will annoy the person. For example, you meet somebody who has missed the prayers and he has actually dodged the prayers. So what can you do? You can at least say, the first temptation is to say, is this not time of the prayers? You see that you are reminding somebody about something that he knows already. So that might not be one of the best ways of doing it, but there will be other ways of saying the same thing. But reminding the person about something that he already knows may not be very helpful, but you may meet the person and deal and talk with the person the next day or at a different time when the person is prepared to talk. And then do not give the person advice on how to go about it, because once the person has gone in that thing, you will be trying to give an advice, but the person is not looking for an advice. In other words, only help the person to make a true question become explicit and which are within him. That is, help the person to see his particular human situation, the spiritual invitation. You know, like we can learn a lot from the scripture. When Jesus was always confronted by others, he used parables to present the same reality. Sometimes we remember when people came to Jesus and say, should we pay tax or not? Can you see the approach that he used? He said, give me the coin so that I can see it. And then from there, he gave an answer. So in other words, we can also see how that is also very helpful in terms of us presenting the values in a life-giving way. Now, I've reached a point.
So
Are you on the floor there in Rome? Are you all back?
Yeah.
Okay. Some people are still missing here, but I think we can go ahead.
Yes, yes. So Candido has questions to Mokone.
Candido has a question to ask. Candido, are you there? Candido? Ah, il microfono, Candido. Micrófono.
¿Me escuchas?
Sí.
Sí.
Yes, 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 thank you.
Gracias.
Go ahead, Candido.
Gracias.
Candido.
Sí.
Si puedes preguntar.
¿Ahora?
Ahora.
¿Hoy? ¿Ahorita?
Sí, sí.
Ok. ¿El padre Mokone está ahí?
Yes, yes.
Ok. Padre Mokone, muchas gracias. Con una pregunta, padre.
Sí.
Los jóvenes
Yeah.
tienen el riesgo de querer vivir doble vida. Esto provocado un poco por las redes sociales, una vida virtual, tienen contacto con muchas personas.
Yeah.
¿Cómo cuidar eso, puesto que ya desde la formación puede correr riesgos de vivir ya como con doble vida, puesto que tú estás hablando de valores en la persona? ¿Cómo cuidar eso, padre?
Thank you for that. You mentioned something there very interesting, a double life. So to put it in a language that is, what can I say, a bit more clearer, that can help both the formators and ourselves, we can say one person wants to live a life of his own needs, and then at the same time, he wants to stretch his leg to the other line of values. So in other words, the person finds himself stretched between these two. But now the proclaimed values that he proclaims, the actual reality is not there, you know. And in that way, before we look at the social media, we come to this area of the needs to help the person to become aware of his basic needs. And in this particular situation, to look at one of the issues that normally is at risk at this particular moment, it is the need for affection. That need for affection, when you look at it, it covers a lot of things. It covers need for support, need for care, need to be loved, need to be advised, need to be surrounded, need to be guided, need to be all that, you know. Because we have experienced this with our maternal, with our mothers, you know, from our mothers. But now, as time goes on, sometimes we don't learn how to take care of that need. And therefore, we tend to reach out to others and expect that from other people. So it is also a need where other people will be having, reaching to us with a nurturance need, like somebody will be taking care of the same needs that I have mentioned. So in other words, what I'm experiencing is one way of needs that I'm expecting somebody to fulfill my life. It's like I'm waiting for my other half in life. Then, when we work on that area, we begin to see what needs to be addressed. Maybe it is not so much that need in itself, it is the whole question of reaching out that the person to awaken his values, to see what kind of things that he needs to appreciate and to recognize. The level of the low self-esteem could be in place. All the other things, we could look into the past and in the history to find out exactly what is happening. Because now today, people like to live in a cyberspace, as you have indicated. So they use the media to reach out and to live in the cyberspace. But the difficulty is not so much the cyberspace, are the needs that are not taken care of or are not even recognized that they need to be taken care of. Are you there, Father?
Yes, he's happy with that. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Not sure if there is somebody else who'd like to clarify something or ask a question or comment on what Father Mokone has said. No, nobody. Oh, there is Ross. Ross has something to say. Over to you, Ross. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonga. Father Mokone, just
Yes.
perhaps just to put more concrete examples in your presentation, because I was thinking, I kept thinking, from your own experience,
Yes.
what did you discover are those natural needs that sometimes it interferes uh, uh, in the formation of the person. It blocks, in other words. Just to give us perhaps more examples, because I'm thinking of some examples already of how these natural needs come out in our formats. In your experience, what are those natural needs that come out from your from the format?
Yeah. One of the things that is coming out very strongly is the conflict. Now I go to a bit deeper because sometimes we only looking at the needs in isolation. Sometimes you find that the conflict, let me say, of intimacy versus isolation will be at work. That's why now you see the person searching for affection. So that's one thing. The other conflict will be trust versus mistrust. Then you find that the person is blocked in terms of relationship. He's afraid of maybe authority figures or even trusting other people. So you begin to see a level of hesitancy, and then you find that sometimes the person is passive. And when the person is passive, now it blocks the progress of the person. The person lives in fear, lives in a situation where the person is not free, becomes indirect, and other aspects that are coming there. So these are natural things that happens. You know, the person needs more affirmation, needs more an element of you know, being given responsibility to achieve something in life. But because of the fear that has happened maybe in the past, the person is even afraid to come out and, you know, just live according to his own values. Yeah. You can also give the examples that you have said. You have one example.
Yes, Father. Thank you for the response. For example, one foreman who often gets sick because perhaps he wants attention from the formators or from others, and at times he would isolate when he's not recognized or he cannot be the center of attention. So I think that's one example I have.
Yeah, thank you very much. That is based on the same need that I've tried to explain. Like, you see, the person would like to get attention, but the other need that is we're talking about is the need to be recognized. So what people will do, you find that they will want to seek attention because they need to be recognized, even though you can notice them, but they need to live in a situation where it's like the world is a stage where they come on stage, they are noticed, something is said, an affirmation is said, and a recognition is said. So when you have that need of recognition, but you also have the need of affect. But now when it is a need that the person is searching for, then we need to help the person and say, we need to help you to recognize your own existence. When people recognize you, it's a plus. But we need to learn to say, okay, my needs to be taken care of. And if other people affirm me or take care of them, it's a plus. But the basic thing is to be able to take care of ourselves. That's what you hear later on when somebody is burned out. You hear the language saying, please take care of yourself. But basically, it will be those needs that would have been frustrated for 10, 20 years or 15 years, or the first 5 years of ministry. Is that okay, Father?
Yes, Father, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see if there is somebody else. Yes, Oscar. There is Oscar as well.
Yes, Oscar.
Hola. Sí, hablo en español. No quería dejar pasar este momento para consultar al padre Mokone una realidad. Él hablaba ayer de la escucha activa y también hoy de la importancia de la apertura y de la dificultad que implica cuando una persona se cierra en sí mismo y no se abre. En poco tiempo de aquí en la casa del post-noviciado yo tuve una experiencia que me chocó un poco, ¿verdad? A mí personalmente. ¿En qué sentido? Se me acerca un novicio o un post-novicio y me dice que tomó decisión, quiere salir de la congregación. Y hablamos, le pregunté la dificultad y me dice que siempre tenía una duda en su vocación y que nunca enfrentó esa duda, nunca se abrió a otra persona y llega un momento dado en que él ya no podía seguir, no podía más continuar. Sí o sí tenía que tomar una decisión. Y ahí también el padre hablaba de la toma de decisión. Una persona sí o sí debe tomar una decisión. Entonces, mi pregunta va en ese sentido. ¿Cómo ayudar a una persona que se encierra en sí mismo? Una persona a veces que por miedo no se abre o por miedo de tomar una decisión. Entonces, desde el punto de vista del acompañamiento o desde las herramientas que nos ofrecen también la psicología, ¿cómo ayudar? Y en ese sentido me sonó mucho lo que el padre Mokone decía ayer, que la escucha activa simplemente acercarse al problema que surge día a día. Me sonó mucho esa frase porque, por ejemplo, en la entrevista nosotros cada mes, y mientras tanto, ¿cómo hablamos? ¿Cómo me acerco cuando veo alguna dificultad? Para no invadir tanto, ni tampoco dejar que pase mucho tiempo alguna dificultad que surge en la comunidad. Y por ahí va mi pregunta y también una cosa que me chocó un poco porque después de estar años en la formación, entonces por fin pudo enfrentarse, pero no dio tiempo para un acompañamiento, no dio tiempo para un discernimiento. Ya se acercó, se abrió cuando la decisión ya estaba tomada. Gracias.
Thank you very much with the last statement there when you say the person was open at the end when a decision has already been made. So that is also one of the things to bring into the consciousness of the person, that if there is no openness right from the beginning, this might be the results, like just to help the person to see how one prepares himself by being available, because some people play hide and seek, and they do not grow. I can give you an example with somebody who was when I was at the novitiate. I tried everything. I even sent him to the parish priest. The parish priest in him agreed that now what Father Mokone is doing, it can be done later on at the scholastic. So I came back, I listened to him, and I said, look, here is an opportunity. Go and see somebody who can accompany you on this point, because I can see it, but I could not try and dig deeper into it because it was going to be a block. So at the end, the person did not go because he thought he will do the thing at Sidara. So I prepared the provincial. I also prepared him. I said, look, you are not ready for the next phase because you have not been, accompanying yourself, but you have to make up your mind and yourself at the provincial. So then when the people met, they said, okay, no, this is a good man. So they passed him on. So, and then I was told that he was passed on. So at least I had written my recommendation very clearly that the person was not ready and the person needed to decide together with the provincial. The provincial had to decide, So 3 months down the line, the guy was already at Sidara. And then he said to the provincial, no, I need a year out. He had just started first year at the scholasticate, and then the provincial realized what he omitted, the decision he was supposed to take, he had to take it now. And then he took it, and then the guy freely left. So sometimes we have situations where people do not want help. Sometimes it's very difficult. Sometimes you have situations where people want help, but it's not available. So in this particular case, you can judge for yourself and see whether this person needed help, because as you are telling me, he only opened up towards the end, like our friend at the novitiate. When it was 3 months left, he said, Father, I'm willing to go and for the session, you see that. And he went, but he told me, Father, I started too late. So in other words, you can see that from the beginning, the person did not see the point, but only towards the end because of the fear of being kicked out. So that is something that one has to judge from the beginning. Is this person going to be faithful to his vocation, or he will always wait for last minute changes? So I hope I'm able to hear or to answer what you have said with the experience that I've shared with you.
Gracias, Padre.
Okay, thank you.
And I think we have Gulshan in Rome. And then there is Freeborn as well. And then we'll continue after that.
Okay.
Over to you, Gulshan.
Thank you, Bonga. My question is on personal accompaniment. We know that in the first formation, we accompany our students And then after the priesthood, maybe there is no spiritual director, there is no other person to accompany the newly ordained priest, or sometimes maybe up until 5 years, we have some sessions on ongoing formation. Well, personally, I believe that accompaniment, personal accompaniment should continue even till death. We always need someone to guide us. But on the other side, there is another position. I mean, while Mauro and we were talking in the while having breakfast this morning, another position is that the person becomes very much dependent on others for accompaniment. So there is less room for him to grow. What is your take on that in those two positions? Thank you.
Yeah, as I said, all the possibilities are there, but it depends on how we take them. The first thing, I could be going for sessions, but the approach is very different. I could be identifying because it's something that everybody else does. Secondly, I could go because, you know, I just feel I can't make it. You know, in other words, I conform, but it's like a duck. You see a duck can swim, but then at the end of the day, the duck is still dry. It just shakes its feathers and it is dry. You see that? So that is the kind of an approach to the sessions or to formation itself. And then the other one is the person begins to see the need of why he has to go for sessions. You see that? Now, a personal experience, I was working at Sidara and I was listening very attentively to the words that people use. And I would ask my brother, you are here today in front of me. What brought you here? Some of the questions would be, some of the answers would be, Father, my superior said I must come here. Then I said, okay, well done. Now take a week, go back to where you are, talk to your superior, look at what has happened at home, and give me just one reason why you are here in front of me. Total change. Because when they come to me already, being sent by somebody, they don't know what actually happened here. Why do I say this? Because we went to do the psychological assessment, and that was trauma. And then the psychologist asked, why are you here? I said, I don't know. I was sent by the superior. So I struggled, you see that. But if I had had the preparation before, I would have done better than that. So in a long term, we begin to see that if the accompaniment is not done at a level where the person is getting help, he will go through the process, but it will not help. It will be more torture than growth. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. That's why it is important for us as formators to prepare the people for what they are going through. Not to take it for granted that Father Mokone or somebody else will explain what is happening. I also take my time. If somebody comes to me, before I start, I put him here and I say, okay, let's look at why are you here and what are the issues involved and so forth. What do you want to achieve? What are you going through? Then we start working. Otherwise, you start working with the person is not ready. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Freeborn.
Thank you, Father Mokone. Maybe it will be a contribution or a sharing question. I don't know, we'll pick up what is, I just want to go into the practicalities. Okay. Just the experience of what I have heard and seen. that in the accompaniment and process of formation, we are having, like in our case, some of the guys are only coming here for 4 years because they would have done the philosophy in the pre-novitiate. And so when you talk about the accompaniment, it feels like sometimes the period is quite short because, I mean, of course, we are still developing. And the question there in Rome was about ongoing, even as people are ordained, how do they get somebody to accompany them, even through spiritual direction? So you find that by the time you are getting to know the guy, you have already sent him for regency. And from regency also, sometimes these things are unable to be handled. And then he comes back and you start processing. So you find that there's that dilemma. And I was thinking that sometimes certain things that personally I can share, you observe, is like, okay, this thing should have been handled from the pre-novitiate already. But the thing is that, of course, now those are policy issues. We are finding that in pre-novitiates, you have philosophy. So it's very difficult even to begin tackling the human aspect. And we've had cases here whereby the guys come here, they are already in the head. So you are trying to, oh, okay, sorry. They said I should slow down. They are in the head and you are trying to go to the heart maybe so that you can help them. And we have had to be bold in the sense that sometimes we have asked the provincials that, look, maybe this person should not go for regency now, but the year he should be out in order to process. He's a good guy. You have helped him and you know that he can do well. So you want him to be out of the system. And two cases we have had, we've done that. And people have come back and we thank God they have been able to transform in a way. And some they insist, no, let's just do the psychological together with the regions. And that is, it's becoming very complicated. But the examples I've given is that we've asked 2 people to be outside the system. We find psychologists or people to journey with them so that at least they can deal with that human aspect. Because if we miss it now, they can get ordained and then problems start. So it's just something that maybe I'm grappling with maybe others as well. And I think maybe, and I've noticed sometimes when I interview them, when I talk to them one-on-one, and I find even when I read the reports, I look at, oh my God, this thing was missed in the pre-novitiate. Maybe even the psychological report has mentioned some of these things. So I think maybe in the issue of the pre-novitiate, maybe, I know like in the region here, a number of units are beginning to separate philosophy and theology, and pre-novitiate. And I think that is giving a bit of a more focus and attention. And I think that's what I went through myself. It's a pre-novitiate without philosophy. And then when they come here, at least you have enough time to be able to journey with them. As I said, I'm not trying to change policy for units, but I think as people come to the scholasticates, these are some of the things we are noticing and experiencing. So how can we kind of balance this pendulum, so to speak, in terms of ongoing process and accompaniment?
Father you have mentioned a number of things there, but I will just maybe stay with 1 or 2. One, as you have said, the timing for the regency should be well prepared so that, you know, when the person goes on regency, all the aspects are being taken care of. I have experienced that when I was doing this kind of work, that when I started working with the guy and then the guy goes on regency, when he comes back, he never comes back. So those were some of the setbacks. So the encouragement and the preparation as well, when the person is there, it's very helpful, but also enough time to be given to the people or the formators to make a good observation and also discernment. That has been one of the issues that were coming. It was not only accompaniment, but it was also the formators themselves found themselves not knowing the person because he was there for 1 year. The next year he was on regency. And then when he comes back, it's time for final vows. And then people say, we don't know this person. So that kind of a situation is unfortunate, but it needs to be addressed, as you say. I choose to just remain there because the other issues can be easily be dealt with in a particular situation. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we will continue now for the Mokone. We were told that you will answer all our questions, so I'd encourage the participants to note whatever questions you have. Father Mokone is still with us tomorrow again, and he will answer all your questions. That's what we were told. Good, over to you, Father Mokone. You can continue.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for bringing all those questions here, because they prepare us already to go into the second point here, or the second part of our presentation here. Here, I'm going to present two methods, as you can see, and some of the questions already came from here. The one is called the inductive method, and the other one is called the intrinsic method. In simple terms, the other method, the values are put from outside. It's like, you must do this and all that, The other method is recognizing the values from inside, where the person is helped to recognize or is helped to internalize the values. Whereas the other method, the person is more or less put in a position where the person will conform or identify, but never internalize the values. So let's see how the two methods are there. Sometimes we use them without realizing them. And we spoke about this issue when we were talking about methods of listening, the 7 steps that we follow. But if we just follow them because they are there, they might not be helpful, but we need to internalize them and see the value of why we do what we are doing. This morning we were doing group work. How you take something in is going to have an impact in when you have to do it. If you don't internalize it, how are the guys going to internalize it? If you don't believe information, how are the guys who you are going to form going to believe information? You see, those are the things that we begin to see here. Now, the central point here is this. Value is an objective reality which is above and beyond us. Nonetheless, it has the prerogative of satisfying the unspecified yearning of the human heart. In other words, we are all open to the values, as we have seen also in the hierarchy of values, except when we are faced with the natural values. Those values tend to keep us close and not be going beyond our own territory and our own needs as much. If it is received, it becomes an interiorized reality by means of the process of internalization. Can you see that? That word is very important in the presentation of the values, because there are different ways where we can take in anything. If I am not convinced about something, it's very difficult to internalize it. If I do it because the formation program does it, it's going to be the level of identification. I identify with others, but if nobody actually pushes this point forward, I'm not going to do it. And then the last one is, I just conformity, I just follow others. As soon as they are away from me, I don't do it. You see, so those are 3 levels of, normally we meet people on the first level of conforming, and then we help them to identify, and then we also help them to internalize. This morning we were talking about the 3 levels or the 4 levels of collaboration. You can see the first level is the one of conformity. The second one, it begins somehow to identify with the group. There is an openness of communication. The third level, there is some work, an identity with the group. And then the 4th level, there is already a sense of unity and mutuality. So you can see how the element of internalization has gone through different stages. So the effect of such internalization is the maximum satisfaction of genuine human aspiration. Father Antonio, you remember you asked simple question. When does this life becomes enjoyable? When there is an element of internalization. When you are just conforming, it doesn't work. You see that. When you get into the chapel, whom are you worried about? You see that. One time I was, his master. So each time when I was taking my car going out, the windows were always opening, So I observed this several times. So I said to them, in the chapel, when you go into the chapel, please focus at God and see where God is. Because me, I will be here today, tomorrow I will be gone. But God will still be watching you. You see that? But I was addressing the other issue of saying, the cat is gone. Let's do what is possible. You see that? So, but these are some of the perceptions that when people get into the chapel, instead of focusing on God, they focus on who is the novice master, who is who, and who. You see, the real focus is lost. So this is the essence of intrinsic morality. It is different from extrinsic morality, which can be stated thus. A value is an objective reality which is above and beyond the person, coming from outside. Can you see that? And it is a way unexpected, questions the life of the person and becomes an interiorized reality through the process of conformity. You see that? Something is new, it's not known. So the person will take it first as something that comes from inside that he needs to follow. But then if the person is not having the will and the interest, that reality will remain in terms of just conforming. And you can see this with spiritual direction. Spiritual direction in the house of formation is essential. But what happens after first formation? You see those who have understood and internalized spiritual direction, they continue. But the ones who never internalize it, what happens? You see that. Okay. So we see there the difference. The effect of such conformity is the abolition of the freedom or to act. So in other words, the person is doing something, but not out of freedom. It is out of compulsion of the needs, because if I don't do it, I will be chucked out. And I have seen that mostly in psychological assessment. People will say, hey, if you don't do it, you will be, you won't get final marks. You see, those kind of things are not very helpful because it means the person has not really understood the process of accompaniment. So intrinsic morality leads to human experience of the value Jesus Christ and his teaching as maximally human and leads to transformation. Now you see, from conformity, you hear a different word, transformation. Living such a value, the person feels he is really back at home. So the method of learning appeals to desire and motivation. Now, the extrinsic reality, where the thing comes from outside, experience of the value Jesus Christ in his teaching is imposition, demanding voluntaristic effort, which makes the person feel his freedom is being encroached upon. So those are two things that we saw. And we can see that they're still there even today. Now let's look at some of the practical things that we see there. You realize the intrinsic one and the extrinsic one. So interiorizes the value through the process of internalization, whereas the extrinsic morality interiorizes the value through the process of conformity. So you can see, if you give this chart to the students, or you also have it, you can see maybe you have been conforming the rest of your life. So you can see what is appealing to you and what is more helpful. If you want to conform, you can see what you are doing to yourself. And if that's the best thing that you think you do to yourself, at least you see it. You see. And value is understood in terms of relationships and dialogue. Here, value is seen as an imposition. No relationship is established. I only do this because I have to do it, and then I get out of it. You see that? I wash the dishes because I'm supposed to dry the dishes. Somebody else will pack it. So after washing the dishes, I go out. You see that? So that is the kind of elements that we see there. The method of learning emphasizes on desire, willingness. Who would like to help us to do this or that? Now here, the method of learning emphasizes on voluntarism, you know. A value is presented in a persuasive way that attracts. It presents a qualitative way of living while leaves the choice to the person. Jesus and the Samaritan woman, you see that we can remember there as well. And on the other side, value is presented in a threatening way. If you do it, you are happy. Otherwise, you are a failure. If you do this, you are a good boy. Otherwise, you are a bad boy. You see those kind of language that we have learned from the past. How many of us are still good boys? You see that? So, number E, the intrinsic morality leads to transformation and increase of freedom. The person feels at home. The other one, it leads the person to voluntaristic effort and loss of freedom. The person feels the loss of freedom. So these are two things that you can already see that they are happening. The other one, there is consistency, but there is a consistency of values. The other one, there is consistency, but there is consistency of needs.
Sí.
So
Oh,
you
sorry.
have.
Sorry, you go ahead. That there's somebody had his microphone on. We'll switch it off. Continue.
Oh, okay, thank you. So as I have said that the intrinsic morality, somehow there is consistency of the values. Whereas the other one, there is a consistency of the needs. So in other words, you hear the two words. The other one, there is a sign of consistency, but there is a lifestyle of values. The other one, there is consistency, but there is consistency of the person living under the influence of his values. And normally this happens when the person is being now ordained. You will say, I made it. Now they will come to know me. You see that? Some statements like that, you know, come out only at the end, not at the beginning. So in order that the candidate may be helped to live the values, there is a need, one, to present him with the objective values of the objectivity of the values, but also helping the person to digest and assimilate them. This is where now we present the values, not from one point of view. We have a variety of people saying the same thing. For example, when we were in the pre-novitiate, the pre-novice master there, he tried to teach us how to pray. And I still remember what the language he was using. There was a book he was reading, and he talked about contemplatio and meditatio. We did not know anything about Latin, but we were dealing with contemplatio, oratio, and all that. And we were all lost. At least I was lost. Meditatio. And then we went into the chapel. We were frustrated because we didn't know now what to do. So we don't know when is meditatio, when is contemplatio, when is oratio, all those things. So the pre-novice master realized that here there is a clash of interest. We don't know what is going on. So he called another sister who taught us how to meditate. This is where the culture comes in now. So the sister I can remember very well, he said, "Do you all have grannies?" I said, "We said, yes." "Have you ever realized that the grannies, when they are sitting there alone, they always have a rosary in their hand and they are quiet? And the children come and play, and she will be, allowing them to stay and play around her, but she is lost in deep meditation, contemplation." And I said, "How is this easy as that, So then we started beginning to ask the relevant questions now, and that helped us and opened the window. But what I'm trying to say is helping the people to assimilate values needs creativity as well, because you might not have all the qualities of, presenting the same values. That's why things like internovitiate experiences, if you are there, it is very important that you have and you bring the resources together to help the people to see. Other people will be good at presenting a certain value that you might not be able to present it well. But when the people see it, they appreciate and then they learn. The same with the scholastic aid. The exchange of formators, exchange of scholastic aid helps in that sense, but also bringing the different resource people that people, can help in the process of formation. So it entails that the educator must avoid the risk of inflexibility or be preoccupied with abstract content. So principles that are concrete, okay, or you must avoid that the concrete person disappears. I mean, I remain in the abstract thing. For example, there was a professor who was a professor of canon law. So he was working in the pre-novitiate, and then people were saying, the students were coming to him, and then he had a common answer to everybody. "Father, I'm struggling with the vow of poverty." That was the beginning of the thing. And he will just say, "Brother, everything is in the book, showing the constitutions and rules." And then tomorrow again, somebody says, "Father, I'm struggling with chastity." "Brother, everything is in the book." So, "Father, I lost my mom." "Brother, everything is in the book." Now, can you see? The concrete person has disappeared. What has remained? The theory, you see that? Yeah. So that is also important, not to follow that route, because you will not be able to follow the person, The inductive method suggests that an existential approach to the educator, which implies 4 steps. The first two concern the subjective pole, while the last two, the objective pole. Let's see. The collection of facts, A. Knowing the existential situation of the individual, like how the day goes. So in other words, that's why the ministry of presence is important, to know what is happening and what are the issues that are there. But many people might see this as a waste of time. They get into the car, go to town, come back, they do the business side, but their ministry of presence become less important. Now, you can see here, like what we spoke about, the level of experience. You can never be able to detect and to see the pertinence of the person's life if you don't have time for the accompaniment. If you don't have time for being present in the formation house, you are always caught up with different things. You will not be able to see some of the patterns that the people are struggling with. So point number B is intuiting the project of life the person is living in this situation. So there must be an element of intuition. Through his actions, he is telling the world that his aims in life are and how he wants to be. So in other words, when you listen to the story unfolds itself, point A, B, C, D. And in that, you see what the person is actually saying to you. There is a constant in terms of his lifestyle, his philosophy of life, and he's guided by the important for me or the other ideals. In other words, you can see if the person is living according to his values or struggles with more his needs and so forth. So there is already something that you see. And then that is the second level of understanding. You see how these things are coming back to us again. And then confronting his actual project of life with objective Christian values. You see that. Does your project of life correspond to the Christian project given by Christ? Does what you want to be correspond to what you should be? In other words, you are provoking the basic conflict to help the person to see the difference between the value system and the need system and help the person to choose his life according to what is life-giving. So point number D, helping the person to modify his project of life in line with the one proposed by the gospel. Can you see that? This is the heart of the intrinsic morality. The value has to be presented as an attractive, otherwise it will not receive any affective response. The individual will not feel attracted to it and consequently may not come to the possession of it. The level of responsibility and decision making. So if you have been following what we have done in the first sense of awareness, you can now begin to see how those different steps are now explained here in a very practical way. Be attentive to the experience. Understand the values that are at place. See the distinction between the lifestyle of values and the lifestyle of needs. Help the person to take the responsibility to live according to his own will. As simple as that. But in terms of engagement, it takes more time, presence, patience, and all the other things, collaboration. Helping the person, therefore, is not criticizing his project of life by offering another alternative. So that is one thing that is important. We offer an alternative as a possibility, but not saying that this is better than what you have been doing. If you help the person to see these two realities for himself, the person at the end will be able to choose what is life-giving. If you work throughout his experience, the person will see the pattern. If you help the person to understand his own values, recognize them, the person will be freer to make choices. And then after the person has seen the possibilities according to his needs and possibilities according to his values, he will reach a stage of saying, Father, no, this is for me or this is not for me. I remember an experience where I worked with somebody for 2 years and the person was growing. And after the second year, the person was brave enough to say, Father, thank you very much. You have helped me. I couldn't make this decision, but I see now I really like to work and support my family. I could not say it this with my family, with my congregation, but now I think I'm free to make a choice. The temptation is to say to myself, I failed my job, but I realized the person was able to reach a responsible and make a responsible decision, even though it was not what the formator or whoever said the person must come to me. And that was not what I was expecting either, but I had to respect the decision of the person. Must respect my decision. Hey, I think we are almost there. Confronting his lifestyle, his project of life implies letting him understand his style deeply. So the whole question of understanding, it's very important. Deeply and profoundly, and see for himself or herself if it is all that the person wants. E.g., if he is too aggressive, what is this aggression seeking? Self-knowledge, whatever other things. It is not a matter of preaching. The individual is put in the condition to preach to himself. And that is not a very easy position to be put into. But as they say, experience is the best teacher. I have also seen that. The less I said and the less I observed sometimes became the best teacher. I was most of the time tempted to say a lot of things, but I made sure that I saw and I remained in silence. And in that way, the person opened up to the internal conflict. And later on, they start opening up. Yeah. So the educator or the formator facilitates this self-knowledge in 3 ways. Explaining his situation to him, that is, enabling the individual to give true and correct names to what is really happening in life. You will see it tomorrow when we're doing that process of handling our emotions in a constructive way. Understanding, that is, enabling the subject give a subjective meaning to what is happening to him. What functions do your actions perform in your life, leading to style of living? Interpreting, that is, enabling the individual confront his behavior with the gospel values. Does your way you live promote or impede or impoverish the gospel you seek to live? So in other words, you see that you help the person to preach to himself. You help the person to see the need for change. In order to help the person, the change begins within, not outside. If I want to change, I want to lose my weight, people can give me so many advices. But when am I going to lose weight? When I start walking outside, taking, necessary. A lot of information I have, but you can see the difference. Jesus can tell us how he achieved that. So this is all what I can say for now. Yes. If there is any question or comment, we can open up for that.
Okay, thank you. There is Andrew already who has raised up his hand. Would like to say something. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you, Father Mokone. I'm just in a sense, a curious Christian myself, that you talk about the religious values and the tension, the spiritual tensions. When someone comes to the seminary, and we presume they have those religious values, that's why they want to embrace this religious vocation. And then they go through some period of formation process. And then they leave the formation because they found it not suitable. But then sometimes you see the person actually not only leave the vocation, but also the person leaves the church as well. And I always have that kind of question in my mind in that formation journey somewhere, what sort of things that went wrong or we didn't do properly, in a sense, if the person, that we didn't help the person to have a deeper faith, but rather to lose the faith altogether. Whether that is the method here, the way that we present the intrinsic value versus extrinsic values that they feel like we have imposed on the freedom, and the person really react to that kind of, and then they just walk away from that. I'm just wondering, somewhere along the way, what went wrong, or we didn't help the person along the way.
Or there was, as you say, there would be a lack of connection and continuity as well. What I could say is through the experience of life, sometimes what brings people into religious life, somebody would say, lasts for the first 3 months. Then sometimes what keeps them going is something else. So we begin to realize that people come with values that are very obvious, but they may not necessarily stay for the same values. They may stay for other reasons. So that's why it is important to recognize the values right at the beginning, and then also to recognize the needs right at the beginning. Because if we only recognize the values, for example, we have an experience of people who are very intelligent. It's what do you call it? An observation I've made. Usually when you have lots of talents in that regard, we pay little attention to what are your needs. And even the person himself always protect himself with a lot of gifts that the person have. And then as time goes on, when the challenge of life, the actual life, when he actually experiences the real life there, then you begin to see that the person have a crisis, because he is not able to deal with and take care of his own needs. So in that sense, it is important to make a balance between accompaniment. First, I spoke about the Saka model, to give every area of the person the necessary attention it needs. Sometimes the people have been given the possibilities, but they never saw the need of doing something. I give you an example. There was one of our companions whom I know very well. We were all together here. We came the same year. I won't mention the name because it's just, an example. The person was coming from a different context than I was doing, but the person was very radical. He would not allow any sense of comfort, and he will be criticizing us. Yeah, you came here with lots of luggage, and you still buying, and what kind of, it's a scandal. You're living in a big house here, and the poor are always there, and they are suffering, you see. So if you look at that way of thinking, the person never took care of his own needs. So he finished nicely, but then when he really met the poor, which he was talking about, he lost every credibility that he had. I don't know what he went through, but he left the priesthood. Now, if you look at his way of doing living, was always focused on the values, but not very practical in terms of taking care of his own needs. I know he came here with one pair of shoes and one pair of techies, and he went back with one pair of shoes and the same techies and the trouser. What happened to him, I don't know. So that's why I don't want to enter into the whole thing. But it's just to help you to see that something can terribly go wrong if we don't take care of the other side of our needs. Thank you for that. I don't know if that helpful.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good answer, actually. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that.
Let's see if we have somebody else who'd like to comment, clarify something, or ask a question. Chimese, go ahead.
Thank you, Father Mokone. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. One of the issues you mentioned is about not imposing, but offering an alternative way of life if you see certain values are not in line in the brother or in the candidate. I just wanted to find out how possible is that. How do you offer them an alternative way without challenging? I don't know if you use that terminology, or without imposing. How do you offer it? How possible is it without pointing out that these values are not welcome in this house of formation? How do you become that soft, especially putting into consideration what Freeborn mentioned about the times guys are coming in with philosophy, they're philosophers, and Wallace, you're trying to work out on a number of issues. They're already talking about going to Regency, they come back from Regency. Then we're talking about final vows preparation and diaconate and all those things. How do you do it in a software that you offer that alternative way of life? Yeah.
Okay. I want to give an example, but first maybe let me explain a little bit more. When I say do not impose, I don't say don't teach. And when I say do not impose, and I don't say do not correct. But the question is, the manner of correcting matters the most. And if I am seeing something that is not life-giving, I must be able to confront it but not in a fighting or aggressive way. It must be in a way that the person can hear that I can see something and I can also point it out to the person. Let me give you a concrete example from when I was the novice master. Guys were going to pastoral work, and one guy had come to me, "Father, I need to buy some clothes." So I was ready to go and buy clothes before he goes for pastoral work. And then after some time, he said to me, "Father, I have some friends who will buy clothes for me." And I said, "Okay, are you sure that you will be in good hands in terms of first buying the clothes and then also having a meal with them and so forth?" He said, "Yeah, sure. They will cover everything." I said, "Look, I'm prepared to go and we buy clothes for you so that when you go for pastoral setting, you have all what you need. You can go and meet your friends. That's also another thing." I said, "No, Father, don't worry. I will be okay." Can you see that I've already pointed out that there are things that are not life-giving, and I've given the person the choice. You see that? Now, what happened? He went into a pastoral setup. He explained his situation to the parish priest, and the parish priest was, "Oh, okay, no, that's fine." He even gave him more money. You see that? "Okay, just go there, have a good time, and come back. We will meet in the evening." Now, in the evening, I'm watching television with some of the formators because I know that this man is taken care by the parish priest. 9 o'clock, I receive a phone call. "Father, this man has not come back." "How? What has happened?" "Father, I don't know." I said, "Let's wait." 10 o'clock, the time has not come back. 11 o'clock, the guy has not come back. 12 o'clock, the guy has not come back. Then we said, "Okay, let us sleep now. The time that we have here for us, it's over. Now it is for the provincial to take over the next day. If he comes at 1 o'clock, that is for him and the provincial." 1 o'clock, nothing. 6 o'clock in the morning, nothing. 10 o'clock in the morning, nothing. 12 o'clock, midday, nothing. Only 1 o'clock. So what would you do in that situation?
Choice is given to the provincial.
To do what?
To find out and make a decision.
And what will be the possible decision that he will take?
Go home.
What a freeborn.
That's it. Probably will say, "Go home."
So I had an expertise of formators around me, and then they said, "This is the best time to act." And they said to me, the provincial has to communicate to him the decision of the provincial, but we will wait for him to come back, and we will receive him back to the formation house after he had seen the provincial. So I got into the car, I went and I fetched him. He said, "Father, hey, had I only listened to you, because you advised me very clearly and I did not listen to you." I said, "My brother, let's not talk about this. Go and see the provincial." So he went and saw the provincial, And the provincial had to communicate to him. And I said, when you finish hearing what the provincial is saying, please come. So he came. And then afterwards he said, Father, I want to apologize. I said, okay, let's sit here. The formators were there. He apologized. And he said, he also want to apologize to other fellow novices. And I called them. I said, do you want me to go with you or you want to go alone? He said, Father, it's better you come with me. You see them. Then he was able to explain his story, ask for forgiveness, and then the next day he was gone. Now, I don't know if that helps in terms of seeing exactly what does it mean to give somebody the alternative, but to leave the person to decide for himself. Chimese.
It does help. Thank you so much, Mokone.
In other words, do you see the elements that are involved in terms of correction, advice, but never imposition of the your thing? The person must be able to choose the consequences of his life, not you making the choices for him.
Yes, I do see the elements.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Chimese, and we'll take Widi in Rome. Should I ask Chimese if you are burning there? There is fire behind you. Go ahead, Widi in Rome.
It's quite hot in
Thanks.
in Texas, so I have to have the fan
in
running up.
English.
Send us some heat, please. Here we are freezing.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Widi.
Yeah, in English. In my mind, and also in our discussion in Indonesia, in certain particular understanding, our formats are like white paper. It depends on us, the formators, to write down or to draw on the paper. It becomes good or not depends on the quality of the formators in very particular understanding. So of course, our formats not really white paper. They come from their background, their culture, etc. But in this sense, okay, we can say like white paper. So the responsibility of the formators are very important to assist, to accompany the format. So in this reaction of mine, I think we need, as formator, need to maintain our quality, our capacity, to improve our capacity by making maybe system. For example, self-evaluation regularly. So formators also need psychological assessment to know the states of himself. And also regular evaluation as a team level of formators. Monthly, etc. And we try to do it in Indonesia to make evaluation. Is it what we have achieved on the track or make deviation? And also to have correctio fraterna from the formats to me as formators. Yes. And I receive, Father, you are good in these qualities, blah, 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 blah. And you are not so good in blah, 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 blah. And it is really need a big heart to receive, but it is helpful to improve the capacities of formator. So related to what you give to us, Father Mokone, the material given are very rich, very helpful, especially in terms of internalization of the values. So I really thank for your help in this matter. I think it is good also that this material given to the very beginning of our formation level, because our formants, when they are younger, they easier to receive the values. Some already said about this, that when they have in philosophy, sometimes they already in the head, difficult to be given advice, something like that. So it is good if it is also become a material that given by in juniorate, pre-novitiate, novitiate, and finally post-novitiate like us now. So if we do this, I think the continuity of formation process will be done better. And just sharing from the Scholasticate of Indonesia, to make our formants realize about the value, we create a program, monthly program, that is case learning study between the students to discuss. So many things happen when they have already finished their formation process. And many things are not learned when they still in theology or philosophy. So sometimes they surprised or taken aback of what comes. And by practicing in the Scholasticate case learning study on what happened in the Paris or everywhere, and they will exercise their skills to discern the values and to make decision. It is just a sharing from us, maybe helpful to us all. Thanks, Father Mokone.
Thank you very much for the contribution you have made there. As you say, as a formators, when you are able to identify some of the needs that you have and also to receive feedback. In accompaniment, it's always important to receive feedback. For example, this morning, when we started this thing of the group work, if you have been listening very attentively, I said, from your own experience, what was helpful and what was not helpful. What was not helpful, we leave it here and we take what is helpful forward. So even in terms of the accompaniment, normally towards the end of the year or whatever, you give a person a chance to be able to see what was fruitful in the relationship you had with the person, but also what was not helpful, as you have said. But then what are the things that the person takes, forward, but also what are the things that the person may leave there because they were things that were not helpful, you see. So that is another way of helping the person to grow, to be critical of the working relationship that has been built up over a number of years. Thank you very much for your contribution. Yes.
Okay, Father Mokone, I have also a question. And you have been using motivation, formation, and accompaniment. These three words again and again you are using. And nowadays we hear very often in the field of formation, accompaniment. So these three words I also see in the life of Jesus, the formator of excellence. And he called the disciple to be with him and to be sent out. And when the disciples were with him, and he really motivated them also. And the motivation also one of the responsibility of the formator, I feel. And sometimes we feel in the name of motivation, sometimes the formators forcefully give something to the formatter, and he is badly motivated. So this is one side, and also the accompaniment we see in the life of Jesus. In the when he was after the resurrection, he was working along on the street of along with the disciples to Emmaus. So he was actually had the full knowledge of the disciples, and he knew them by name and person as well. So when we think about these motivations, so the formator should know really the core of the person, but sometimes it doesn't happen in the field of formation. So because of the persons and also because of the formator concern. So can you enlighten me with what are the psychological aspects that we as formators need to be concerned when we think about the motivation of a person or the formatee?
Okay. We did not say much in terms of the oblate values. We just spoke in terms of values in general. So you also help the person to see the values of the congregation, promoting the person to see what he had at home, how you make a connection between what the person has learned from home, because that is very unique and it needs to be maintained so that the person grows from what he had and makes a contribution in religious life, because it is important to recognize the value of the family in the formation. Formation or vocation is not of one person. It is of the whole village, or it is for the family, those people who influenced you when you joined. You did not join from the atmosphere. You joined in a particular context, in a particular parish and so forth. So some of those elements we don't emphasize too much, but it is important to recognize the connection between my own formation and the formation I received from my family, the formation I received from my own friends, particularly on the section of sexuality. Many of us never got proper formation in terms of the area of sexuality. We got it maybe from friends, from school, from all that. So these are some of the areas that are very important in the accompaniment that will also affirm the person, but also see that the person can contribute something like, for example, cooking a dish from Jaffna. You see, that already, it changes the person. Jesu, just cook something for these new formators, something that you learn from home, and see what they will be afterwards. You see that? So you see how the whole thing works. And then we can show to Benji. Benji, do that paste that you normally do. Piri, hammer them with the nchema from, you see, those kind of things, they are very important in terms of supporting and motivating the people. But it's not only in the material things, but we also have elements like liturgy. You know who are the people who sing very well, who are the people who, so in terms of affirming and motivation, sustaining the tension within the group. Like Father Tim had said, how do we sustain the tension? By developing those life-giving motivations for projects that are life-giving. I don't know if that answers you. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, there is Benjamin as well in Rome.
Benjamin.
You explained about the needs are very important in every person's life, and you gave one example. So during the formation, sometimes as a formator tend to look at just because one candidate is a multi-talented or differently able, many talents are there, by overlooking the actual needs, do you recommend, or is it good to promote for the further stage of the formation?
I would say before promoting, at least give the person the opportunity to grow. I want to give you an example.
Yeah.
When I was at the novitiate, there were two guys, excellent. One was an excellent cook, and then the other one was an excellent librarian. How did I challenge them? I said to them, you two must work together. The one who's an excellent cook hardly touches the books, you see that? So I said, you go and work with this one in the library, at least touch the books, know how they are organized, and know what is there, and learn from the one who is very good. And then I said to the one who doesn't know how to cook, but good with books, you are in the kitchen. You learn how the menu is being prepared and presented and so forth. So I gave them ample freedom. So one time I said, no, I want to test the one who is in the kitchen. So I asked the one who's supposed to be learning in the kitchen, I said, my brother, can we go to the kitchen? Where do you find this dish and this pot and that one? Father, really, to tell you the honest fact, we maintained what we usually do. The one who's in the kitchen continues to be in the kitchen, and I continue to be in the library. And as I speak to you today, I didn't recommend them to leave, but both of them left because I understood that, look, they resisted formation at its best, but they gave a very good, consistent agreement that let's keep our separate ways. And separately they went. Because I was not with them. They was with another novice master afterwards. And along the way, they went. So I don't know if that helps a little.
Yeah, thank you very much. Looking at the time, I think we will stop here. I'm not sure if there's some concluding remarks you'd like to add for the Mokone.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I appreciated it very much also to learn from experience. There's a material out there, but as you can see, our experiences are very rich in terms of opening the windows for us and also learning from each other. There's a lot of experiences that we have learned from. I also learned to learn from other people's experience. Thank you for sharing your experiences also with me. I have learned quite a lot. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Father Mokone, there was a video you wanted us to show. We still have 2-3 minutes. Good. And then today we're celebrating the Feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. And as you know, that's very close to us, especially the community in Aix-en-Provence. Our house was the convent of the Carmelite sisters. So in union with the community in Sidara, we'll pray in Aix-en-Provence, we'll pray the Angelus as our concluding prayer.